Talking NFL draft, we're going to have Connor Rogers from the Bleacher Report, also the Stick to Football podcast, join us now. Connor, how you doing this afternoon?
What's going on, guys? I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Doing well. Glad to have you on, as always. Hey, we're going to have the draft on time, and we spent last segment talking about, I know the GMs and some teams want to move it back. Looks like the NFL is pretty firm on their dates.
Yeah, it seems to be that way. And if you're the NFL, I mean, they feel like all eyes have been on them. They were obviously clearly very stubborn about not moving free agency. So a lot of players that need to take physicals because they're either in rehabs or have lingering injuries, that kind of caused a lot of hang-ups for them right now. We've seen Jadeveon Clowney not signed. We've seen someone like Tony Jefferson not signed. So they've been stubborn about not changing their calendar at all, really before, COVID-19 got even more serious with the shutdown. So it seems like they're going to have the draft. It'll be virtual coverage, probably with a look in at players from their homes more so than ever. But I can't see the dates being moved here, guys.
Does this affect just the undrafted free agent guys that you don't get a chance to see at pro day? Does this affect everybody maybe from the third round on and those guys that aren't the top tier players? Who does this affect the most, Connor?
Yeah, I would lean more towards the entire day three group. And I think the most important thing here, Hester, is that for the guys that didn't get combine invites, this is an absolute dagger because at the combine, you know this as well as anyone really, is that, all those medical checks go on there in Indy. And without those now, you do the medical checks by bringing in. You have your 30 visits you can use. You can go to pro days. You can do a lot of different things post-combine in the 2 months leading up to the draft. But essentially, because of COVID-19 right now, there were not many pro days. I know T. Higgins was able to get him in really at the deadline, it felt like, but that was not the norm here. A lot of players have not been able to have their pro days. And for the players that did not get to go to the combine, now teams are sitting there. And if they've had any medical questions throughout their college career, it could have been a season-ending injury as a sophomore or a freshman that they looked like they bounced back from as junior and senior. Teams will still have those as lingering questions. And unfortunately, a lot of times, teams will just take the player off their board if they don't have the answer to the question. So the character players that they want to sit down and do interviews with, yes, they're trying to do FaceTimes. But, I mean, I think you know as much as anyone right now. How much can you really learn about just a FaceTime interview versus bringing a guy in? So this has turned the entire draft world, really the players outside the top 100, upside down.
We're talking to Connor Rogers, NFL draft expert from Bleacher Report. But so that is kind of the fascinating part to me, Connor, is that you're not going to have as much information this season, this draft. They're not going to have as many answers. And am I wrong? Is that going to change? Is that going to create some exciting kind of twists and turns in this draft? Are teams like, if I'm a GM, do I have to be more willing to accept that risk since everybody's going to be operating from that same standpoint?
Now, everybody operates in different ways. You have, some risk-averse GMs. You have some GMs that are willing to pretty much, take on a lot of whether character or health flyers. You can go across the board and look at the trends. Ironically, somebody like Bill Belichick over the years has taken a lot of guys that had lingering health questions, whether it be, Sony Michel, Malcolm Mitchell, who had to retire early. Just last year, somebody like Yannick Just was somebody that had lingering injuries at West Virginia. So the Patriots are a team where I've noticed, ironically, the medical red flags aren't taken, I guess, as serious with them, while you'll have some teams, like I think somebody like Joe Douglas with the Jets, Mike Mayock with the Raiders, the Baltimore model. I feel like teams like that would rather take the higher floor players. So it's going to be very interesting across the board how this is handled. Now, what I would say is I would not be surprised, guys, if we're having a conversation, say 4 years from now, and we look back at this class, and this is one of the most impactful UDFA street free agent classes, just because teams were not willing to use a draft pick on a lot of the guys that were not at the combine or guys that were leaning so much on their pro days, but they're willing to sign them as UDFAs because it doesn't cost them any draft capital, and then more players than ever actually turn out being hits. So it's really a really interesting development with this year's draft.
Hey, Connor, what's the smoke on the street? How many LSU players are going in the first round?
Oh, man, I love when we do this on this show. I mean, we have the obvious of Joe Burrow at number 1. Everybody's raving about K'Lavon Chaisson right now. I think the thing that went under the radar with somebody like Chaisson is that you love his pass rush tools, but he's a complete linebacker. They use him a lot in coverage. He's a really high IQ run defender. It felt like he only got better as the year went on, which is really important. So Justin Jefferson had a really eye-opening combine. The film was great, and everybody was just kind of hanging on that 40, and I think he overachieved in the 40 by a lot. So those three are obviously the big locks. Grant Delpit and Christian Fulton are interesting to me. Delpit's somebody that had a phenomenal 2018, and I think he just he really bottomed out in 2019 on a championship team, which is really surprising. But so I'm curious how teams value a player like that, where Fulton, to me, it's just about health. And so many teams, guys, need corners right now in the first round. And Akuta's going to go in the top 5 or 7 picks, where after that you have C.J. Henderson, Fulton, Jeff Gladney. They're all grouped together. So I think it's actually pretty good news overall for somebody like Fulton, where LSU is. I would go more in the top 50 because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to sneak into that top 50. Obviously, I think if Sadiq Charles didn't have any character questions, he would go a lot higher than he's being projected. So across the board, this draft is just absolutely filled with championship LSU players.
Connor, so now to shift it to the NFL team perspective, franchise perspective, do you have a team or franchise that you think is most poised to kind of show overnight improvement through the draft?
Well, you would hope it's the Miami Dolphins because they have 3 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, and they can maneuver almost up and down the board any way they want. Now, if they capitalize on these picks remains to be seen. Everybody has kind of slotted Tua to them, whether it's a trade up from 5, whether it's at 5. I wouldn't rule out Justin Herbert going there. And this is a team that also needs a left tackle, and I think they should probably consider pivoting from 18 on up to get one of the tackles rather than sitting there at 18 and probably getting stuck with someone like Austin Jackson from USC, Josh Jones from Houston. Those guys are in a different tier than the top 4. So Miami's looking really nice. I actually look at the Vegas Raiders right now because I thought they had a quiet but solid free agency. I think they've built a nice foundation over there over the last year since Mayock got there, and they have 2 first-round picks. So when you look at it with the Raiders, they're in position at 12 to probably get any wide receiver they want. And then they're back at a position in 19 where they can get somebody like Patrick Queen, who I didn't even mention before, will definitely go in the first round. They need a cover linebacker. So the Raiders and Dolphins could do a lot of damage in this draft, guys.
Connor, Patrick Queen, the biggest mover since the end of the season to date?
I would think so, just because I know people like myself and probably across the general NFL draft media just didn't expect him to declare, to be honest with you. I think, you watch him and Phillips over summer in this linebacker class, and there's a lot to be excited about with those guys. But number one, I could speak personally. I didn't expect LSU to have one of the greatest college football seasons in the history of the sport. So that was really, really important. It's kind of hard to go back to school when your stock is as high as ever. And let's be real. The last, 6 games, not only was this guy the best cover linebacker in the entire country and one of the better ones we've seen in a while, he was playing really, really good sideline-to-sideline run defense.
Yes.
So for somebody like Patrick Queen, man, you have to declare at that point. So, yeah, I would consider him one of the biggest risers really from November on.
Catching up with Connor Rogers from the Bleacher Report here on Hanging with Hester. Connor, which team's draft strategy changed the most after free agency, in your opinion?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good one. I think when you look at it, probably the Chargers are the easiest one to figure out because everybody was sitting there saying, okay, they're going to try to sign Tom Brady. They have a lot of options sitting here, and they're really only quarterback on the roster that they feel they could put out there to start is Tyrod Taylor, which I know they like him as a bridge guy, but they don't like him as the long-term guy. So with the Chargers ending up not getting Brady and then really throwing their hands up and saying, you know what, no Brady, we're good. We'll sit and wait until the draft. It seems like I know they need a left tackle. They only have Trey Pipkins there right now. They signed Brian Bulaga, who's been really, really hurt over the last year at Green Bay, but he's really good when he's on. I know they need a left tackle, but the Chargers sitting there at 6, I think they're going to look into moving up to 3 or 4 to jump Miami, and I think they're a team that, they obviously want Tua Tagovailoa, or they'll settle for Justin Herbert. So I think for the Chargers, it's a big one because they're zeroing in on the quarterbacks now.
Last one I've got for you, Connor. You talked about quarterbacks. How many quarterbacks do you think go in the first round? Because I think you can have an argument for up to 4.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 4 now. The caveat here that I would like to explain is New England is the team that can make it 5 because you just never know what Bill Belichick's going to do. And another team that really showed no activity on the quarterback market in free agency, which is absolutely astonishing, to be honest with you guys. I mean, you know enough about Jarrett Stidham. from those years at Auburn where, we'll see what he has, but you're not betting the house on him. Brian Hoyer's your classic backup. So you look at it, Burrow's going to go number 1, Tua's going to go in the top 5, Herbert's going to go in the top 10. I think a team is going to pivot at some point in the first round to land Jordan Love and probably give him a redshirt year. And maybe that team is New England. But why I say New England can get this number up to 5 is you just never really know what they're thinking, whether it's Jake Fromm, Jalen Hurts, Jacob Eason. They're one of these teams that they think outside the box. They look at everything differently, and they might surprise everyone on draft night.
Connor, so this isn't draft, but do you have any insight as to maybe what ends up happening with some of the starting quarterbacks that are out there right now, like Cam Newton and Jameis Winston? And has Andy Dalton been cut yet?
No, not yet.
So Andy,
okay.
Yeah, I had conversations about moving him, and I think they fell flat. Now, what I was explaining to somebody last night, the problem with Cam Newton, and it's no fault of his own, is that Carolina kind of did this rope-a-dope move where they said out loud that they believed in him going into the season, so teams weren't convinced they were going to trade or cut him. Then everybody made their quarterback plans, guys. Bruce Arians is a perfect press conference to take away from this. He came out and said, listen, Tom Brady was our number 1 target. If we didn't get him, we were going to get Teddy, and if we didn't get either of them, we were going to bring back Jameis. That right there is a perfect outline of how NFL teams think before free agency. Nobody put Cam Newton in their plans because the Panthers were acting like they were going to roll with him and see how he looked when he got healthy. And after everybody added a quarterback, including the Bears getting Nick Foles, then he's free. So now everybody's sitting here. The Chargers have really resigned themselves, as I know, to taking a quarterback and having him work in camp with Tyrod Taylor. So where are these guys going to go? You know what I mean? If you have a young quarterback like Josh Allen with the Bills or Sam Darnold with the Jets, those guys have had their ups and downs. You're not bringing in Cam Newton because then the spotlight's always on him, and it creates a disaster. I remember when the Jets did this with Sanchez and Tebow a couple of years ago. It created a nightmare scenario, and I know Cam is a better player than Tebow, which makes it even harder. And for Jameis, he's going to have to accept that he'll have to be a backup somewhere and really improve his stock for the 2021 season.
All right, he is Connor Rogers, does an outstanding job for Bleacher Report, also Stick to Football podcast. Connor, always appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe out there.
All right,
Thanks,
you
Connor.
as well. Have a good afternoon.